The first time I met her, she looked me up and down, smiled, and said, "Your trouble in sneakers." I laughed it off, but I didn't realize then how those words would come to haunt me, and how she would change the way I saw everything. I still remember the first time I walked into my friend's house, sneakers squeaking against the polished wooden floor. It smelled like home in the kind of way that wraps around you, brewed coffee, something faintly sweet cooling on the counter, and a trace of lavender from somewhere I couldn't place. I wasn't expecting anything more than an ordinary visit, but then she appeared. My friend's mom. She stepped into the doorway of the living room, arms folded loosely, her head tilted just slightly as her eyes swept over me. She was in her early 40s, though she carried herself with a kind of elegance that made the years look like a secret strength rather than weight. She wasn't dressed for company, just in a soft sweater and jeans, but there was something about the way the light from the window touched her face, it made her look both confident and quietly approachable at the same time. And then she said it. "Your trouble in sneakers." Just like that. No introduction, no polite hello. Her voice carried amusement, but beneath the humor was something sharper, something she wasn't saying out loud. The kind of line meant to brush someone off lightly, but the way her lips curved into a smile betrayed that she wasn't entirely serious. I laughed, maybe a little too quickly, rubbing the back of my neck. "That obvious, huh?" I teased back, though inside, her words landed deeper than I wanted to admit. She arched an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth tugging upward. "Trust me, I've been around long enough to recognize that kind of energy." It was playful. Harmless. The kind of banter you'd expect between a friend's mom and her son's buddy. And yet, something lingered in the air after she said it. Maybe it was the way her eyes didn't drift away immediately, how they stayed on mine just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Or maybe it was how my chest felt suddenly tighter, aware of her presence in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself not to overthink it. She was my friend's mom, off limits, simple as that. But even as I tried to shrug it off, I caught myself noticing little things, the way her hair brushed her shoulders when she turned, the light sound of her laugh as she called out something to her son in the next room. She carried herself differently from the women I was used to, no rush to prove herself, no attempt to grab attention. Just a quiet confidence, like she'd long since learned how to own a room without raising her voice. I remember sitting on the couch, sneakers tapping against the floor, pretending to scroll through my phone while she moved around the kitchen. Every so often, her voice floated back toward me, mixing with the clink of mugs and the gentle hum of the kettle. Each sound felt oddly comforting, like background music I didn't realize I'd been missing. When she returned with a cup of coffee for herself, she paused near the doorway again. "You always this quiet?" she asked. "Depends who's asking," I said, forcing a grin. Her laugh was soft but genuine, the kind that made her eyes crease slightly at the corners. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot that this was supposed to be just another ordinary evening at my friend's place. I didn't know it then, but that simple exchange, her teasing line, my nervous smile, would stay with me long after I left that night. There was something in the way she looked at me, half in jest, half in warning, that told me this was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was trouble in sneakers. But standing there in her house, with her smile lingering in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover just how much trouble I could be. The days after that first encounter, her words kept circling in my head like a tune I couldn't shake. "Your trouble in sneakers." It was meant as a playful jab, but every time I thought about it, I caught myself smiling, and then immediately questioning why it mattered so much. The truth was, I had started noticing her more than I wanted to admit. Noticing the way her presence seemed to fill the house without effort. Noticing the difference between her laugh with her son and the softer, more careful way she laughed with me. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't looking for it. But she had a way of being impossible to ignore. One evening, I was at my friend's place again, lounging on the couch while he disappeared upstairs to grab something. The television was on, some muted sports channel I wasn't really watching. What I did notice was the faint rhythm of her footsteps in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes, the low hum of her voice as she hummed to herself. I told myself not to look. But of course I did. She was at the counter, her sleeves pushed up as she rinsed a few glasses. The soft glow from the overhead light traced the outline of her shoulders. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, and yet, it felt like everything slowed down around it. When she turned, carrying one of the glasses toward me, the faint scent of her perfume drifted ahead of her, subtle, warm, with a note I couldn't place but wanted to breathe in again. She held out the glass casually. "Here, you look like you could use some water." I took it, careful not to let my fingers brush hers, though the temptation was there. "Thanks," I said, maybe a little too quietly. Her eyes lingered on me for just a second, curious but unreadable, before she nodded and turned back to the kitchen. It should have been nothing, just a small kindness. But my chest stayed tight even as I sipped the water, wondering why something so ordinary could feel so charged. Later, as I sat at the table with my friend, I caught her passing by again, her hair falling slightly into her face as she tucked a strand behind her ear. Our eyes met for a moment, brief, but long enough for me to feel the heat rise in my cheeks. She looked away first, but not before a small smile tugged at the edge of her lips. That smile stayed with me. It was different from the polite one she gave neighbors or the indulgent grin she gave her son. This one felt almost private. Like it was meant only for me, though I couldn't be sure. I realized I was starting to watch for those little things, the way she leaned against the counter with her arms folded when she was amused, the way her eyes softened when she was deep in thought, the way her voice lowered when she asked me something directly. And on her end, I could feel a shift too. Nothing obvious. Nothing reckless. But there were times she'd glance at me longer than necessary, or pause before responding, as if weighing the risk of saying too much. It was a quiet curiosity, unspoken but undeniable, like we were both standing at the edge of something neither of us had planned for. I caught myself wondering what she thought of me beyond her son's friend. Did she see me as just a kid? Did she hear her own words echoing back, "trouble in sneakers," and feel the same unease that I did? I didn't know. And maybe it was better not to know. But every time I walked into that house, I felt it, the subtle gravity between us, pulling closer in ways neither of us wanted to admit out loud. That it happened on a night that wasn't supposed to mean anything. My friend had stepped out for a while, a quick errand, he said, and I was left waiting in the kitchen. I didn't mind, I was used to killing time. But what I wasn't expecting was for her to join me. She walked in quietly, carrying a mug of tea, the steam curling up into the low kitchen light. "He won't be long," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Her tone was casual, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of curiosity and hesitation, like she wasn't sure if sitting down was a good idea, but she did it anyway. I nodded, shifting slightly in my seat. "No problem. I'm not in a rush." For a moment, there was just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint tap of rain outside. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. Just still. Then she tilted her head, studying me the way she had the first time we met. "You're quieter than most of the guys who come around here," she said. I smiled faintly, unsure whether that was a compliment or an observation. Guess I never saw much point in filling silence just to fill it. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." She lifted her mug, blowing gently over the surface before taking a slow sip. That opened the door. We started talking, not about anything earth-shattering at first. School, music, the kind of mindless small talk that usually floats away as soon as it's said. But something about the way she listened made me want to keep going. She wasn't nodding distractedly or half-checking her phone. She was there. Present. Her eyes stayed on mine, steady and unhurried, as though what I had to say actually mattered. And then, almost without meaning to, the conversation deepened. She asked about my plans, about where I saw myself in a few years. I admitted I wasn't sure, that sometimes the future felt like this wide-open field I wasn't ready to cross. She laughed softly, not unkindly. I know that feeling. Trust me, it doesn't really go away. You just learn to walk through it anyway. There was a softness in her voice that caught me off guard, like she was speaking from a place I hadn't been allowed to see before. Is that what you did? I asked quietly. Her eyes flickered down to her tea, fingers tightening just slightly around the mug. I tried. Some choices worked out. Some, not so much. For the first time, I saw something in her beyond the confident, playful woman who'd called me trouble. I saw the weight she carried, not heavy enough to break her, but real enough to leave shadows behind her smile. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, listening. And maybe that was enough, because after a moment, she let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. You're easy to talk to, she admitted, glancing up at me with a half-smile. I felt my chest tighten at that. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how she said them, like she was surprised by it, maybe even a little unsettled. Same goes for you, I said, and I meant it. The rain outside deepened, tapping steadily against the window. The kitchen light cast a soft golden glow around her face, making the moment feel like it was pulled out of time. Her laugh came again, freer this time, and I caught myself memorizing the way her shoulders relaxed, the way her eyes lit up when something I said amused her. At some point, our knees brushed beneath the table. Neither of us moved away. It was nothing. It was everything. By the time my friend returned, we were both sitting a little straighter, our conversation drifting back into safer waters. But something had shifted in that kitchen, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. And as I left that night, her words echoed in my head again, softer this time, stripped of the playful tease they once carried, your trouble in sneakers. Trouble she no longer sounded so certain she wanted to avoid. The days after that kitchen conversation felt different. Not just to me, I could feel it in her, too. Something unspoken had passed between us, something that hung in the air whenever we were in the same room. And as much as I wanted to lean into it, she began pulling back. At first, it was subtle. She no longer lingered in conversation the way she had that night. Her smiles came quicker but didn't stay as long. If I caught her looking at me, she would glance away almost immediately, as if reminding herself she shouldn't be caught staring. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I had blown our late-night talk out of proportion. But the tension was real. I could feel it in the silence between us, in the careful way she avoided standing too close, in the way her voice would soften when addressing me, then quickly sharpen again if her son walked into the room. One evening, it was raining hard outside. I sat on the couch, waiting for my friend to grab his jacket before we headed out. She stood near the window, arms folded across her chest, watching the water streak down the glass. The glow from the lamp cast her in a soft, golden outline, highlighting the curve of her shoulders, the thoughtful set of her mouth. For a moment, I just watched her, caught in the quiet beauty of it. She seemed lost in thought, far away from the noise of the house, and I wanted to step into that silence with her. But then she spoke, not looking at me, not even turning her head. You should be careful, she said softly. The words caught me off guard. Careful. She drew in a slow breath, her arms tightening around herself. About this. About being here so much. People talk. They notice things. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, not anger, but a kind of weary protectiveness, as though she was trying to shield both of us from something. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. I'm just here to see him, I said quietly, though we both knew that wasn't the whole truth anymore. She finally turned toward me then, her eyes meeting mine across the dimly lit room. There was no teasing in them this time, no playful spark. Just honesty, and something like fear. You know what I mean, she whispered. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain drummed harder against the glass, filling the silence between us. My chest felt tight, not from what she'd said, but from what she hadn't. I wanted to tell her I understood. That I knew the lines we were tiptoeing around, the risks that pressed against us. But I also wanted to tell her that I didn't care, that something about her pulled me in, no matter how much she tried to push me away. Instead, I just nodded. I know. Her expression softened, almost painfully. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but her son's footsteps echoed down the stairs, breaking whatever fragile honesty had passed between us. She turned back toward the window, her arms folded tightly again, as if closing herself off. By the time we left the house, I couldn't stop replaying the moment, her voice low, her warning laced with emotion. She was hesitating, pulling away, but not out of lack of feeling. If anything, it was the opposite. And that was what made it harder. Because sometimes silence says more than words ever could. And in her silence, in her careful avoidance, I could hear it clearly, she felt it too. She just didn't know what to do with it. Neither did I. It happened the way these things always seem to, not planned, not deliberate, but in the small accident of being in the same place at the same time. I had stopped by one afternoon, planning to head out with my friend. He'd disappeared into his room upstairs to grab something, leaving me waiting in the living room. She was there too, sorting through a shelf of books tucked neatly in the corner. I hadn't thought much of it until I stood to help, noticing a spine jutting slightly out of place. We reached for it at the same moment. Our hands collided. For a split second, neither of us moved. Her fingers grazed mine, cool, soft, before she quickly pulled back. But the hesitation in her motion told me it wasn't only instinct, it was restraint. She let me slide the book free, but her eyes lingered on my hand longer than they should have. "Thanks," she murmured, her voice a little quieter than usual. I handed it to her, trying to play it off as nothing. But the air felt different now, charged, almost humming. I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock, the muffled thud of rain outside, the rise and fall of her breathing. When she slid the book back into place, I noticed a strand of her hair fall forward, brushing her cheek. Before I could stop myself, I said softly, "You missed a spot." She looked at me, puzzled. I gestured lightly to the strand of hair, and for a moment, I thought she'd brush it back herself. But she didn't. She stood there, waiting, maybe unconsciously, maybe on purpose. My hand lifted before I could second-guess it. I tucked the strand gently behind her ear, fingers barely grazing her skin. It was nothing more than the simplest touch. Yet in that quiet room, it felt like the loudest confession. Her breath caught, so faint I might have imagined it. But her eyes, wide and steady on mine, told me I hadn't. We stayed like that for a moment, too close, too still. My hand hovered, not quite daring to fall away, not quite daring to stay. Her gaze softened, though I could see the battle in it, the careful restraint trying to pull her back from whatever line we were standing on. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't." Her words were meant to break the spell. But the way her voice trembled, the way her lips parted just slightly, only drew me in further. "I know," I said quietly. Silence followed. Heavy, fragile, full of everything we weren't saying. Her sleeve brushed against mine as she shifted, and even that slight touch sent a spark racing through me. I wanted to hold on to it, to bridge the space between us, to let her know that I felt what she felt. But at the same time, I didn't want to push her further than she was ready to go. So I stepped back. Just half a step, but enough to let her breathe. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if steadying herself, then exhaled slowly. When she opened them again, she gave me the faintest smile, not playful, not teasing. Just soft. Grateful. And in that smile, I saw the truth. It wasn't that she didn't want the closeness. It was that she didn't know how to allow it without risking everything. The sound of footsteps upstairs broke the moment. My friend, finally ready to head out. She and I both turned toward the sound, but for that heartbeat of silence before he appeared, her hand brushed mine lightly, almost accidentally, or maybe not at all. It was nothing. It was everything. And as we left the house that day, my heart pounded with a realization that was becoming impossible to ignore. She felt it too. It was late when it happened, the kind of late where the house grows still, where every sound feels sharper against the quiet. My friend had already gone upstairs for the night, leaving me in the living room to wait out the rain. I told myself I'd leave once it eased up, but deep down, I think I knew I wasn't in a hurry. She appeared in the doorway, barefoot, holding a half-empty mug of tea. Her hair was down, a little undone, and her sweater hung loosely over her frame. She looked softer somehow, not the composed woman I'd always seen, but someone more real, more vulnerable. "You're still here," she said quietly, almost like an observation rather than a question. "Rain's not letting up," I replied. She nodded, stepping into the room. The lamp cast a warm glow across the couch, and she settled into the armchair across from me. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the occasional creak of the house. Finally, she broke the silence. "You make this harder than it should be." Her voice was soft, but the weight in it made my chest tighten. I shifted forward slightly, elbows resting on my knees. "What do you mean?" She let out a small laugh, not amused, but almost nervous. "You. The way you look at me. The way you listen. It's disarming. And it shouldn't be." I searched her face, but she kept her eyes fixed on the mug in her hands, as if afraid of what she'd see if she looked at me. "I don't mean to make things harder," I said gently. "But I can't help how I feel when I'm around you." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "You're too young to understand what this could mean. Too young to realize the mess it could make." I leaned back, trying to find the right words. "Maybe I'm younger, sure. But don't confuse that with not knowing what I feel. Because I do. And I think you feel it too." That was when she finally looked up. Her eyes glistened under the lamplight, steady yet vulnerable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in the softest whisper, she admitted, "You make me feel alive in a way I haven't in years. And that terrifies me." Her honesty hit me harder than anything else she could have said. I swallowed, my voice low. "Then why fight it?" She shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Because life isn't that simple. Because you're supposed to be my son's friend. Because people would never understand. Because I don't even fully understand it myself." The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was full of the things we couldn't say, the questions without answers. Slowly, I reached out, my hand brushing hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. She didn't pull away. If anything, her fingers shifted slightly, curling into mine. The smallest gesture, but it felt monumental. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "You shouldn't be here right now." "Do you want me to go?" I asked. Her eyes softened, glistening with something between longing and fear. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she shook her head ever so slightly. "No," we stayed like that, hands barely touching, hearts pounding, the rain filling the silence around us. Nothing more, nothing less. Just two people sitting in the glow of a lamp, knowing their lives had already changed in ways they couldn't undo. And for the first time, neither of us pretended it wasn't real. The rain had eased by morning, but the heaviness between us lingered. I woke up on the couch, stiff but strangely calm, as though some part of me knew we had crossed a line that couldn't be unseen. When I sat up, I found her already in the kitchen, moving quietly, almost deliberately, as if each small action, pouring coffee, setting a plate on the counter, was a way to ground herself. She looked up when she heard me. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she offered a soft, careful smile. "Coffee?" "Please," I said, my voice still husky with sleep. The kitchen smelled of roasted beans and faint cinnamon. She slid a mug toward me, her fingertips brushing mine for the briefest moment. Not an accident. Not anymore. And yet, the air between us was different, not charged like the night before, but steadier, gentler, as though we were both bracing ourselves for what came next. I took a sip, then looked at her. "Are we going to talk about it?" She let out a breath, part laugh, part sigh. "You don't let me off easy, do you?" I shook my head, managing a small smile. "Not when it matters." She sat across from me, wrapping both hands around her own mug. For a long time, she just studied me, as if memorizing my face. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a kind of fragile honesty I hadn't heard before. "Last night. I don't regret it. But I do worry about it. About us. About what it means." I nodded slowly. "I don't want to cause trouble for you. Or for him. But I can't pretend I don't feel something real here. And I don't think you can either." Her lips curved into the faintest, bittersweet smile. "You're right. I can't." She paused, eyes dropping to her mug. "You're younger, but you see me in ways no one else has for a long time. That means more than I can say." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with truth, yes, but also warm, almost protective. I leaned forward, my hand covering hers on the table. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers shifted, weaving with mine, steady, sure, unhurried. "What do we do now?" I asked. She met my eyes, and in them I saw the flicker of every battle she was fighting, the tug between duty and desire, fear and longing. Then she spoke, carefully but with conviction. "We don't rush. We don't make promises we can't keep. But we also don't deny what's here. It deserves better than that." Her words wrapped around me like something both tender and unyielding. I nodded. "So we take it one step at a time." "One step," she repeated, her smile soft but genuine. "No matter how small." We sat like that for a while, hands linked across the table, letting the morning light filter through the curtains. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless. Just a quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it had changed us, and it wasn't something we could walk away from pretending it hadn't happened. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The world outside was damp and fresh, carrying the smell of wet earth and renewal. As I slipped on my sneakers, she rested a hand on my arm. I looked up, and she leaned in, brushing a kiss against my cheek, soft, lingering, full of all the things we hadn't said. "Be careful," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I smiled, my chest tight but hopeful. "You too." As I stepped outside, I realized the word she once teased me with, "your trouble in sneakers," had taken on a whole new meaning. Not reckless trouble, not destructive. But the kind that shakes you awake, that forces you to feel alive again. And walking away that morning, I knew neither of us would ever see life quite the same way again.